Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Ion Society. Today's topic, as you can see, is freedom of speech, and I think right now is the perfect time for it. So before we go into the video, and the video is quite short. But before we go into it, I do feel it necessary to mention the fact that today is September 11th. And of course, I wish to send my support to every one of the Americans who either lost a loved one or has a loved one who is still coping with the aftermath of 9/11. I actually met with a few people during one of a demonstration about 3 years ago who was suffering from health issues following their involvement in the rescue efforts of 9/11. So I wish to, of course, support all of my American friends who are still reeling from the shock and horror of that day, as well as everyone else who has suffered basically in the aftermath of it, because that really did, and it's I think it's timely that we're talking about this now on September 11th, and the idea of freedom of speech and what it means to us. So, the video that you're going to see now in a few minutes is going to go through the history, really, just 5 minutes of where the idea of freedom of speech came from. And then you and I, me, people in the chat, we're going to discuss what freedom of speech means now. And most importantly, what it doesn't mean. We're going to have disagreements. I can see a good few people out there that I will have a few disagreements, polite disagreements with. But yeah, you're all welcome. So I really want to thank Tattie for being here, because Tattie is my producer and he makes sure that everything runs smoothly. And Tattie is going to run the video. Freedom of speech is one of the most contentious issues in today's society. Questions of who can say what and how far is too far has been discussed and debated for centuries. Very few people understand the concept in its entirety, so let's dive into history and the evolution of freedom of speech. The origins of free speech dates back to around the 13th century. Still seen as a highly symbolic agreement today, the Magna Carta was originally an attempt to quell civil unrest amongst barons in England. It inspired some of the most widely used legal structures in today's society. One of the most important ideas to emerge from the Magna Carta was the start of a conversation of protecting free men under the law from persecution of thought, speech, or act, without being judged by their equals. This toothless document began the long historical conversation about what speech is protected under the law. During the English Civil War of the 1600s, the Parliament of England demanded that all books had to be licensed and approved for legal publication. John Milton was one of the advocates who spoke out against what he saw as censorship, which served to undermine public discord. This began the next step in securing freedom of the press and protection of dissenting voices. In both instances, this was highly restricted to high-born intellectuals. The English Bill of Rights was an attempt to enshrine into law freedom of expression, albeit for limited sections of society. 1791 was the next leap in protections for freedom of speech. The First Amendment to the US Constitution states that the government will not create laws that would impede freedom of expression, speech, religion, the press, or the right to assemble. Again, these freedoms were only intended for and extended to certain groups of people. It is this amendment that is commonly misunderstood today, as granting free rein to say anything, anywhere, for any purpose. However, the amendment only talks about preventing the reprimanding of free speech in advance of that free speech being uttered. It does not mean freedom from consequence. Originally, the First Amendment did not include government agencies that were unelected, nor did it include private corporations. Though there were some protections given during the First World War to dissenters, it was not until the 1960s, during the Times versus Sullivan case that the US Supreme Court intervened to protect free speech. The interpretation became clear that the First Amendment extended to any government actor, elected or unelected, as well as public schools and universities. The record on where the line is in relation to what constitutes freedom of speech has been incredibly arbitrary. In France, it was the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen that enshrined the rights to freedom of speech, but with limitations. Memory laws makes it a crime, for instance, to challenge the state's version of history. In 1990, France has increased focus on these laws, to the extent that if in breach, a person can be fined excessively or incur a prison sentence. Memory laws in France converged in 2005 to give direction towards the discourse around French colonialism. However, since then the laws have become more broad and heavily implemented in certain parts of the country. The last piece of framework in relation to freedom of speech came in 1948, when the UN decided to enshrine in international law the standard that every civilized country should aim for. Article 10 of the Human Rights Act states that everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. This is by far the clearest bastion for free speech. The setback is that the UN Council of Human Rights are not legally binding for nation states. They are seen as goodwill aspirations, but they are always superseded by the laws of the country. Laws surrounding hate speech, child endangerment, or incitement to violence are just some barriers to absolute freedom of speech. The conversation has now moved to the online realm. Never could the architects of any of the previous frameworks foresee the astronomical role played by social media in everyday lives. A considerable amount of opinions and education has come in the form of streamlined news feeds, which, in turn, has created mini echo chambers. The ability to filter news based on past interactions has seen a widening of the ideas gap. Where before people would be confronted on their ideas, now individuals are so isolated in these echo chambers from opposing views that they don't know how to defend, debate, or discuss views. One of the biggest challenges around free speech is the line surrounding hate speech. When does something go from simply being distasteful to being deceptive to being outright dangerous? And should the idea of no platforming for such individuals exist? In a world where social media dominates our everyday life, what role and responsibility do they have in protecting or restricting free speech? Okay, so thank you, Tattie, for running the video. Thankfully, I didn't have to listen to it yet again. I think I've listened to that for 2 months, and yeah, it's been cut and it's been changed and whatever. But the main thing I wanted to get across in the video was the basic progression of human rights or free speech, but also to get across to people that there are limits to free speech. So tonight we're going to go through some of what people believe free speech is and what it actually is. As I said in the video, a lot of people take freedom of speech in the American sense of freedom of speech. And while that is the most vastly used and vastly interpreted version of freedom of speech, I mean, I've had First Amendment auditors in Ireland trying to use the First Amendment, and I'm like, yeah, but you don't actually live in the US. But in general, everything besides the UN Charter of Human Rights was aimed squarely at particular people within society, mainly well-to-do white men. I'm seeing there in the chat, Clive Wells, you are not a victim of suppression of free speech. I am not censoring you. You're a weirdo. I love you, but yeah. Jefferson says, I don't believe there should be any limits to speak. Unless the people speaking are American conservatives, they shouldn't be allowed to speak. Right, well, that's the thing. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. American conservatives in particular, well, conservatives in general, will always cling to this idea of free speech as a way of saying anything they like without any repercussions about any and anywhere at any time. So the problem with that is, even with the First Amendment was originally thought up by yeah, we're going to talk about deplatforming as well. Sorry, Titan. So it was originally thought up in order to protect, in a way to uh, reject the anti-federalist agenda that was going on by the Republicans at the time, the Democratic Republicans. So Thomas Jefferson's party. And what it was trying to do was to try and take the wind out of their sail by saying, you know, you can say anything you want, especially in Parliament, or you can write anything you want and you're not going to get reprimanded. But that also means that I can write what I want and damn the consequences. And the problem with it is what it escalated to was levels of unprecedented aggression within the US Parliament. It was never meant for any other race other than Caucasian. It was never meant for women, and it was never meant for working class people. So that's important to say. It was never the intention of the founding fathers to give freedom of speech, unfettered freedom of speech, to beyond just their own class. People in the space abuse the free speech. Again, I'm going to come on to that a little bit. So when you look back at the Magna Carta was English barons were getting really upset at the conditions that an awful king was putting onto them. And after the Magna Carta came in, 12 days later, I think it was, the Magna Carta was annulled. It was like just destroyed. And then I think it was King John tried to reestablish it, and that failed.
Aye, it was King John.
Yeah, there was 5 times. Yes, it's a very tedious read. It's mainly about local conditions in England, but out of it came really, really important ideas like the idea of trial by jury, trial by your peers. And although it didn't directly influence it, it was an important step in the right direction. Thank you to Mike Hall for $5 US. Says, glad that you're here at a time that I can help support your channel. And Mike, thank you so much, because anything that I put out, even if you can't be there for it, you do watch back and you do comment, and it means a lot. So thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you finally have an opportunity to actually join the live stream. Because yes, as Critical Cripple keeps telling me, apparently Life on the Flip Side is done in the middle of the night. So I don't know. Yeah, so the First Amendment, Audrey is right. The First Amendment was originally about government censorship. And this is where people are misunderstanding what freedom of speech is. At no point was any corporation or any private entity included in the First Amendment. It was literally about government not reprimanding you or stopping you from saying what you wanted. Now, the other side of that is, once you've said what you wanted to say, you could still be held accountable. So it didn't actually ensure that after you've said your potentially vile thing, according to whatever government of the day, that you couldn't actually be prosecuted afterwards, because there is a whole string there's a whole string of things that come after that. Sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. And thank you so much. Yes, Mike, you did become a member, and I'm really glad you did. Tatty for £5 says, "Does this button work?" No, you're gonna have to try it again, Tatty.
No, oh, damn it, Christ! Right, hold on. See if we can find where
Please
I found
don't.
that button again.
Please don't. Jeez. So the First Amendment was never about freedom from consequence. Even in its inception, it was never about freedom of consequence. So you could say something like the first instance of freedom from consequence or protection of free speech at a government level was, or at a Supreme Court level, was during World War One. Before that, before World War One, if you went against the government of the day, you could still be reprimanded, even under the First Amendment, because there's all of these other things like the Espionage Acts, to protect the ruling class of the day. And thank you so much to Christopher Shapley, DVM CVA, everyone's favorite American veterinarian, for becoming a member. Yay! And we do need to talk about the animal stuff. And no, before anyone tells you, don't listen to anyone that tries to say that I want all vets killed. I don't. I love vets. So yeah, it is a very, very important thing. Chris Shapley says, "I thought I was a member for 10 US dollars." Well, you're a patron, I think, as far as I'm aware. So I mean, that's huge. You don't have to be both. I really appreciate either one. But you do, and as you can see, there's the Iron Society things. I do want to upload more little images for people to use.
Ooh.
And that will come. Taddy, we'll talk about that afterwards.
Indeed we will. And stick in the comments if anything that you'd like to see, just for suggestions.
Absolutely.
Always welcome.
And anyone that says a tree, get the fuck out. Telling you that now. So
and multiples of 3 as well.
Yeah. Oh, do you know what? We do need the 33. Yeah. The Illuminati symbol. Godless Scummer for £5 says, "Will you not have a cup of tea? Go on, go on, go on, go on, go on, go on, go on." That is a Father Ted reference. And actually, I do have a cup of tea here, so I have my cup of tea. Thank you, Godless Scummer. See, I don't suppress freedom of speech. I just don't always go along with what you say. Like, so I'm waiting for. Well, it's already been said that I censor Clive Wells. I don't censor Clive. I just don't agree with him. My channel. So here's the difference, right? My channel is not a democracy. And therefore, there is no such thing as freedom of speech, because if I don't want you speaking in my chat, there is a little ban button that I can give. It's fun. Everyone should give it a try. Well, don't abuse it now. Don't abuse it. Because I have a few like trigger finger happy. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. Trigger happy people in the chat that would abuse the range. Sorry. Anyway, back to freedom of speech. So initially, it was never supposed to protect you indefinitely. It was just to allow you to put out your pamphlet. In particular, that's when it was conceived. That was the idea. Most people. I'll get to that now in a minute. Most people, at the time of its conception, would have been writing. I don't think the founding fathers of the US could ever have conceived of the notion of social media. So it was a case of the architects of these great pieces of writing were writing to the time. It was never supposed to be, and I don't think they would be as arrogant as to presume that they would have been able to predict what was going to happen into the future. So the whole point of the amendments is to allow for for the ability to change the constitutions. And it's not just the US that I'm talking about here. So I censor Tusk every time he asks for a dragon, says Godless Scummer. I don't. I just make it clear that he's not allowed to have one. See? See? I disapprove of anyone allowing Tusk, of all people, Tusk, the ability to have a dragon. That's the difference. That's the difference. I can't actually physically stop anyone from giving Tusk a dragon, but I would like to see in the chat #no dragons for Tusk. And no, I did not promise Tusk a horse, and nor is he getting one. Could you imagine Tusk with a bloody horse? Whew. That'd be dangerous. He's trying to get an axe, people. He's trying to get an axe. We don't want that. So, when it comes to the First Amendment auditors, even when it comes to the conservatives in the US, in the UK, talking about freedom of speech, we're going to get to the extreme, both left and right. We're going to get to the extremes now in a bit. When it comes to the conservatives, the idea of freedom of speech and being freedom from consequence, they don't understand that in order to have freedom of speech for them, it also means their political opponents have freedom of speech. Now, the problem with it is that conservatives don't understand that, and Jefferson will actually back me up on this, that private entities such as Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of them, Instagram, I suppose, they have particular rules. They are not government entities, which is what the First Amendment covers, which is what most of these things cover. It's freedom of expression. So you're free to express yourself in a public sphere, and free from repression from the government of the day. And up until the 1960s, I did make a mistake in that video. It wasn't 1960, it was 1964 that you had the case, one of the biggest cases. I'm trying to pull it up now. The Irish Times versus Sullivan. And that was a big deal. That was the first time that the Supreme Court, other than World War I, actually came down on the side of freedom of speech, where Louisiana, I think it was Louisiana or Georgia, was actually trying to sue the New York Times for publishing articles from Martin Luther King Jr. And saying that they were libeling the state. And Tina Jones spotted a goat. And the Supreme Court said, actually, if it's true, just because you don't like it, it doesn't mean that you can actually sue the New York Times for printing it because it's an opinion piece, or it's this, or it's that. So that was the first inkling of change within the US, especially when it pertained to the Supreme Court. And then in 1968, there was a landmark decision that a criminal prohibition against burning a draft card didn't violate the First Amendment's guarantee of free speech. The idea of burning the flag, burning the draft card, refusing to serve, that was not in breach of freedom of speech. That was a big deal. So ever since then, they've actually gotten involved. The Supreme Court has actually taken the side and set precedents of agreeing with freedom of speech. Not always. It is very difficult, first of all, to get your case to the Supreme Court, second of all, to win your case. But when it comes to social entities, private entities, there is no rule in any constitution holding private entities like Facebook, like Google, like Twitter, any social media account to freedom of speech standards. And the main reason for that is they are private entities. It's just like, for instance, if you went into work today and you screamed at your boss that he was a fucking moron, doesn't stop your boss from turning around and say, okay, you have the right to say that, and I have the right to hand you your P45. It is the same thing, that just because it is within this public sphere, your the First Amendment and most rights to free speech in legislation are geared towards the government, not towards private entities. And that's something that a lot of right wingers don't understand. And I mean conservative. I don't mean the far right. We'll get onto the far right now in a sec. Which would land first? What do you mean? Lassus vulgaris. I like that name. Um, Totally unrelated, but if you tape a slice of buttered toast to the back of a cat, you can make a perpetual motion machine. Thank you for that, Godless Scummer. I think I'm not sure. Why would you be taping buttered toast to a cat?
Like a perpetual motion machine. Yep. The theory is sound.
Yeah,
I've seen the
Audrey
research papers.
Audrey Reberdew has a right. Social media platforms are private enterprises, and they can set their own rules. But what conservatives try to impose is because it is within the public sphere. Yes. Oh, Terry Pratchett. Don't even.
Oh, Pratchett.
We both love Pratchett. We're both fans of Pratchett. But
Take his name.
steam is coming out of Clive's ears right now. Yeah. I've lost where I was. Basically, they are private entities. The private entities do not hold true, because any freedom of speech or freedom of expression and freedom of the press, by the way, as well. When you're talking about hosting sites like YouTube, like Facebook and Twitter are the main ones, but when you're talking about entities like this, they have their own set rules. They are not public entities. Although they're in the public sphere, they're not public entities. Freedom of speech is usually seen as a negative right, says Titan. That means the government is legally obliged to take no action against the speaker on the basis of the speaker's views, but that no one is obliged to help any speakers publish their views, and no one is required to listen to or agree with. Well, that's not exactly true. That's my point. The government is legally obliged to take no action against the speaker. That is not true, because there's all of these other laws that come into play with freedom of speech. For instance, the Espionage Acts, the Official Secrets Act in the UK. If you came out and said, it is my right to speak about my day while you're under the Official Secrets Act, you're going to get arrested. You're going to get arrested because you have made an agreement. It is so it comes into play with different laws. The same thing I mentioned there, that it's September 11th. After September 11th, freedom of speech went out the window. For a large perspective. I am free to stay silent. All rights reserved. I do not have to answer questions. I will stay silent. I want to speak to your manager. Arto is becoming a Karen. But yeah, there's certain acts came to pass after 9/11. And I know Tatty has issues with saying 9/11 because, the way we do it, that is the 9th of November.
Yes. That is the 9th of November. I mean, but to me it makes sense. Day, month, year, increasing order of size or magnitude, but right, whatever. That's my freedom of speech, and I'm choosing to use it that way.
Well, because of 9/11, a lot of things changed. A lot of freedoms were given up in the justification of national security in the US. So it's a very interesting turn of events that what's happened over there. For instance, you can be held under certain sections that came in after 9/11. You can be held without suspicion and without a lawyer for a certain length of time. The Patriot Act, that's the one I'm thinking of. The Patriot Act changed a lot. It really did, Audrey. It stripped a lot of rights away that in the interest of saving time. And then out of that, what you also saw is a lot of the networks creating all of these TV shows to back it up. You have the likes of NCIS and stuff like that, Law and Order, and all of that to try and justify the likes of the Patriot Act in the hearts and minds of ordinary American citizens. And it's really interesting. You can see the popularity of these kinds of shows absolutely exploded after 9/11. But the idea of 9/11, reclaim the calendar, the idea of 9/11 becoming a barrier to freedom of speech cannot be overstated, because a lot of people during that time, now when 9/11 happened, I was a teenager, so thankfully I was kind of sheltered from that a little bit. But at the same time, freedom of speech went out the window. It really went out the window. There was a lot of journalists, freedom of the press went out the window. It was seen that if you were against the war in Iraq, then you weren't patriotic. You were a national embarrassment. And a lot of people in the press were told either you had to accept a positive spin on the war, or you were going to be blacklisted from. And there was a lot of people that were put on the no-fly zone because they were critical of the government. Yeah, look at what happened to the Dixie Chicks. The Dixie Chicks were literally blacklisted. Their records weren't allowed to be played. The same happened with Green Day. The same happened with many other bands. They weren't they were cancelled. The concerts were cancelled, especially in the Rustic Belt of the US, because it was seen that you are betraying your country if you are anti-war or if you are critical of the war. So this is important. And then coming back to Europe, then we've had a few. Well, not the Bible Belt. The Bible Belt wasn't so bad, but the Rustic Belt, the Midwest, were kind of iffy when it came to that. But in 2015, I want to say, was it 20? Yeah, September 2015, will live in infamy in the hearts and minds of French people, because the Charlie Hebdo office was attacked. People were killed.
Je suis Charlie.
And that was for drawing the Prophet Muhammad. And I'll quote better minds than mine. The worst crime of religion is not convincing people that it's real. It's convincing everyone else that you can't criticize or make fun of it. So it's an important thing to understand. So when it came to Charlie Hebdo, all of a sudden in Europe, I don't know if you remember, Tatty, but all over Europe, there was this huge movement for freedom of speech.
Oh, yes.
But nobody seemed to understand what freedom of speech was. Do you know what I mean? They were against the killings, but when they looked at some of Charlie Hebdo, because Charlie Hebdo's drawings, they were out there.
Yeah.
They were controversial.
They were well known. They were well known for their satirical material, and it was extreme satire. They like to find nerves and prod at them a wee bit, which is perfectly acceptable. There's a long-standing tradition of it within journalism, certainly within the UK, going back to the publications such as Punch, and that's still going today. And yeah, it's satire and poking fun at the establishment and figures of authority and institutions is all
Yeah.
part of that. It's
And
your fair game.
there was a case, I think it was in the 80s, where there was two court cases. One was held in Canada and one was held in the UK, and of a publication making, again, satire of Muslims. And what was found was, although they were prosecuted in Canada, they weren't prosecuted in the UK because and it was brought to the House of Lords. Um, it was brought to the House of Lords, and what they said was, well, they're not making fun of the Anglican Church, so therefore it's okay. So the idea of freedom of speech and being free of reprimand is only on certain conditions, and you need to be able to know which condition in which country in order to avoid prosecution. Godless Scummer says, I have a lot of issues with Charlie Hebdo. That magazine is a fucking racist rag, no doubt about it, but they didn't deserve what happened to them.
Correct. They
I'm
didn't deserve what happened to them.
I'm getting to the extremism of this now, because I agree. Nobody deserves their life to be taken from them. Nobody deserves to be attacked and abused for saying or doing things that are, in essence, harmless, but completely reprehensible, completely vulgar. I don't like Charlie Hebdo myself, but I would fight for their right to be able to say whatever the fuck they want. And this brings me on to the idea of deplatforming, especially on YouTube. A lot of people in this community cheered and celebrated when Sleeping Warrior and Nathan Thompson lost their channels. I was in the minority of people that weren't. I did not celebrate that. I did not think that was a good thing. Do I think they're morons and imbeciles? Yes. Do I think they're spreading misinformation? Yes. Do I think they deserved to be nuked? No. Sleeping Warrior, I will, to an extent, he did. And that's only when it became seriously dangerous, because he fixated on the idea of a woman who was given a vaccine, um, and spread the rumor and spread the lie and latched onto it with force that she had died, which was not factually correct because she was in work a couple of days later. So that really annoyed me. So in cases where someone is latching onto a case like that is clearly false, then yeah, whatever fucking happens to you, you deserve. But in terms of the whole flat earth thing or conspiracy theorist thing, here's my problem when it comes to deplatforming. More and more, because of social media, we live in these bubbles, we live in echo chambers, and we don't really get to see what those we disagree with are actually talking about. We don't give them the chance to explain why they think like that. Now, the likes of Nazis, they're Nazis because they're Nazis. That's not a good enough excuse for me. It's not a good reason. In order to, because we live in these echo chambers, we've been filtered due to social media. Our news has been filtered to the extent that we don't know how to argue our positions anymore. Saying something vile and disgusting and something that I would disagree with, as much as it annoys me, my feeling on it is, um, if you are not able to combat that and to beat back that bullshit, then you don't understand where you stand on it in the first place. If you're not able to articulate why their position is wrong. And the problem with it is, um, typically in the real world, first of all, you'd be facing the person, so they're not able to be quite, or they're less likely to be quite as vile. Um, oh, that is a good question. I will get to that in a second, Turtle Moose. Um, over social media, because it is so easy to be invisible and anonymous, uh, the frustration and the nastiness, the unfiltered nastiness that you would get, that you wouldn't get if you were face to face with the person, that's more likely to come out. And the problem is, I would rather, okay, for instance, Nazis complaining about censorship when the first thing they do when they got into power is muzzle the press and other groups and other members of society. Yes. But here's the problem. When you deplatform, or when you don't allow them to have a platform, what tends to happen is they're going to have these opinions and thoughts, and they're going to go onto other platforms and spout this nonsense anyway. And so the question is, should vulnerable minds be left to unfiltered extremists? Or should it be out in the open where we're discussing and debating these ideas and we're able to tear them down? Now, I know people who are absolutely avidly deplatform. No platform for Nazis, no platform for this, no platform for that. And I get it, because any one person that they actually convince of their nastiness is one person too many. But by deplatforming, you are turning them into the victim. You are giving them a baton to beat you with. The right wing, the extreme right wing, the BNPs, or not even the BNP, because the BNP are rubbish, the EDLs, the Proud Boys, people of this caliber, they're going to be around. I would rather them try to recruit out in the open so we know who the fuck they are. One of the scariest things about Charlottesville was when you looked at that crowd, they could have been anyone. They could have been anyone. And if they're not challenged, then these ideas fester and grow to the extent that by the time you realize that these assholes have these opinions, instead of being able to pick them off at an early point and say, this is absolutely unacceptable and here's why, they're left in this little bubble to fumigate those fucking, to grow those beliefs and that animosity. Now, should YouTube have a 30-day timeout like Facebook? That is an interesting question. That is a very, very good question. Audrey, I will get to your question in a minute, because that is the point of this conversation. The problem with something like YouTube is, because it's so big, because it's so vast, and because of cancel culture, I suppose. I do want to draw on the difference between cancel culture and what's the word? I can't even think of the word now. And consequence culture, I suppose. Consequences.
Consequence, aye.
It's an important one. It's an important one. The problem is, if something offends you, you have every right to be offended, but I have every right not to give a fuck.
So,
Because right now, go on. Sorry, Tatty, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, I was trying to type into the chat, but it was taking far too long. See, the trouble is with free speech and what have you, today's society, just when you're saying consequences and going into people there and offence, people today are far too offended by the most menial of things. I mean, really, they go looking for offence. If free speech, even in a mild form, was properly introduced, people would be having coronaries in the street, going apoplectic with offence and outrage and all this Oh no, yeah,
Well, we
that's
do live in outrage culture now, where and we've seen it, Taddy. We've seen it where you'll be following people, or not you, but people will be following someone, and as soon as they say something that this person has stepped out of bounds, all of a sudden they're leapt on. Um,
oh Christ, I.
and it's that group think that if you're a fan of someone, if you're a fan of something, and that person says to you, these folks are bad because I say they're bad, then usually what would happen is uh, they're attacked by all of these little fanboys and girls. And the problem is when you come to YouTube, who was it? Who was it that was getting their shit taken down? Fucking Schrodinger's cat and the other First Amendment auditor
Oh, what's his name?
exposers.
Radical. Aye,
Radical.
radical.
Um were being mass flagged for their content, for exposing the bullshit that First Amendment auditors they were going in and mass flagging it. And so if you have a situation where you have a 30-day thing from 30-day deplatforming, then what? That's half your audience gone, because by the time the month has passed, half the people have forgotten about you. They've clicked off, they're not interested. And I hate to say that, but it's true. We
They've
do
found
have
something else to watch.
Yep, we do have a short attention span in today's society. So, and that's the fear, that you have real people that are exposing important things, but one attempt at a mass flagging, and then all of a sudden, or a couple of mass flags, and they're taken off YouTube, or they're taken off Facebook, and it's the wrong way of doing it. Do you know what I mean? So, would I be in support of a 30-day ban? No, I really wouldn't, because it's too easily manipulated and abused. There needs to be account taken, yes, especially for like incitement to violence or incitement to hatred. But outright banning, especially as we've seen during this pandemic, they just don't have the personnel to actually deal with um, each case on an individual level. The when the crisis hit, what was happening was the bots went into overdrive. So anything that you were doing that could potentially even be seen as wrong was being flagged. So would I be in favor of a 30-day ban? No. No, I really wouldn't. Um, unless it's been really addressed by human beings and not bots. Why can't people just be civil? That's an important thing to talk about. Uh,
Manners cost nothing. Manners cost nothing, but they mean so much, and they have so much value. They
well,
really do. Sometimes the old folks did have it right. Manners, they literally they cost nothing, but they do have so much value in society.
apparently, Chris didn't realize he was offended. um, the whole point with being polite towards people you disagree with, I always try. I always try. Don't always succeed. People have seen me on my channel. I don't always succeed. It takes a lot to get me to a point where I'm absolutely pissed, as you have seen recently. Um,
Yes, normally 3 bottles of whiskey.
yes,
Oh, sorry, different type of pissed.
yeah, yeah. It takes that many. Shameful. Used to take 5. No, I know. Um,
Angry
it takes
Kayla
a
is
lot.
not a good Keela.
Yes, angry Keela is a scary Keela. Apparently, um, I have tried to remain civil when it comes to debates. My feeling on it is that the debate is never aimed at the person I'm disagreeing with. It is always aimed at the person who might be listening. That is an important difference. What I'm finding is I grew up doing debates. And what I found is because of social media, because of the anonymity, people have lost all bloody sense of themselves in terms of um, responsibility. Uh, so, what tends to happen as well in the last 10 years or so, I'm not going to say in the last four because or the last five because it's not down to Trump. These divisions, these polarizations have existed for a long fucking time. So all of a sudden, in the last 10, 15 years, you see a complete polarization of left and right in politics. And the problem with that is when you can't see your opponent as being a human being because of the anonymity of the internet, you're not in front of the person. Yeah, hate the idea, not the person, exactly. But because you're not in front of the person, it is easy to see them as less than human. And when you see someone as less than human, it's easy to then abuse that person because they can't do anything. There is no repercussions. There is nothing that will happen to you for being nasty. And so, because you have such frustrations elsewhere in your life, you need a place to bring those tensions and bring those frustrations out. And usually it is with people that disagree with you. But you can't do that with the people in your life because you lose the people in your life. And so you go on online um, and you scream there. And it's easy to let out those frustrations at a little avatar. I say that knowing that I have an avatar, a little avatar that's online that can't do anything to harm you, that can't attack you, that can't abuse you, that can't tell your family and friends what you're like. It's easy to do that. So uh, not only are we polarized as a society, uh, the idea of the individual is now a dominant trait. You are seen to be it's seen as a strong character if you believe in individualism. So my voice is the only voice. My voice is the most important voice. And this is where 30, 40 years of conditioning towards individualism and away from collectivism, away from community, away from anything that binds us together as a society, you have been seen as you have to do it for you. Nobody else is going to protect your rights. Nobody else is going to do this for you. Everybody over there, that group over there is lazy, and it's reinforced, yeah, by the likes of Fox, CNN, and MSNBC in whatever way. Um, so you have a situation where whatever news feed has been thrown at you, whether it's left or right, because I've seen it in both. Right wing a lot more intense, but I've seen it in the left as well. So when you have this filtered news, again, you're not getting those alternative views. You're not getting the opposite or you're less likely to go out and search for news. So you're already pent up and frustrated because of whatever is happening in your life. Uh, you believe in individualism. A lot of people believe in individualism. My voice, my voice, my voice. My life is more important. My life is important. And then you have a situation where there is no repercussions for what you say online. So that's where you see a viciousness coming to online discourse, where before it was you have a discussion, you have a disagreement, you'd probably call each other idiots, but the absolute vileness that's coming out of political opponents or social opponents now, like some of the language that I've heard used, it is, in my view, incitement to violence. The idea of take a long walk off a short cliff and stuff like that. The idea that if you disagree with me, you deserve something bad to happen to you. You deserve, and it's
Is it not
because
part
we,
of propaganda tactics that as well,
to an
demonising the other?
extent, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a bit especially when it comes to the right wing. Um,
I,
it is a tactic.
I would say historically it could be more easily associated with the right wing, but as you say, politics is politics. It could easily happen on the left as the right.
Well, I mean, take the cages. Take the cages, for instance, in the US. Um,
Hmm.
the cages for migrants.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it. I really hate to bring this up because I would be center to center left. But the cages that were constructed during the Obama era, implemented during the Trump era, and continued during the Biden era, it just goes to show that when it comes to the party politics at the top, there's very little difference. And the outrage, the absolute, I mean, I thought people were going to lose their shit when it came to Trump uh, excuse me, when it came to Trump implementing using the cages.
Mm-hmm.
And people on the left were absolutely mental, going mental. This is human rights abuse. This is barbaric. As soon as Biden got in and put up some new fucking curtains, brought in a few doctors, therefore it's all okay. They're living in prefabs. They're living in fucking. They're still being taken away from their families, or they're still divided from their families. But that's okay because it's Biden. You know,
Because it's your guy that's doing it, not theirs. It's
yeah.
the
So
partisanship.
So what is actually happening as well when it comes to debates is it's this idea because of individualism. It's this idea that I'll wait for you to stop talking, so it's my turn to talk, but I'm not going to listen to any word that you say except for I'll pick a few trigger words that I can absolutely go off the rails with you. So there's no discourse. It's not a debate. It's an argument. It's wait for this person to shut up so I can talk now. You see it all the time with political opponents. You see it all the time with religious opponents, um, across the spectrum. Uh, that it's just a case of I'm not listening to you. I'm waiting for you to shut the fuck up so I can talk. That, when it comes to public discourse, especially around freedom of speech, is a dangerous thing. And I agree with Tusk when he says, the first thing that fascists would do is remove rights. And you can see that in throughout the Middle East. You can see it now, literally before our eyes, with the Taliban getting back in to power over in Afghanistan. You can see it. Um, they are attacking human rights, civil rights, and you'll see it more and more. So yes, it stems from the top right down to the ground, but at the same time, we are responsible for our own individual reactions. And if you lower yourself, and it's easy to do, when you lower yourself to the standard of your opponent, it's very easy to end up in a dumpster fire. And dumpster fires, we are, especially in Western society, we are addicted, not to drama, but to the spectacle. We love spectacle. We can't look away. If there's a car crash, someone said to me, oh, it wasn't. It was a comedian called Fluffy. Anyone that knows Fluffy, hashtag Fluffy in the chat. Um, and he's talking about like the difference between driving in the US and being in India, for instance. If someone drops dead in the middle of the road in India, they will drive around and they will use all lanes, um, except for if there's a cow. But in the US, in the Western world, not even just in the US, I seen it here tonight in my own country. I was stuck behind an accident because everyone, yes, Bob Nodell, Gyroscope knows who Fluffy is. Um, There was an accident on the motorway today. It took me 3 hours to get home because everyone was like refuse. Well, first of all, obviously the
It took
accident
it
took
took
up
the
the
police that long. It took the police that long to get the statement off her because she caused the accident.
yeah. Um. Well, it wasn't. It was because everyone was driving so slow in order to see what happened. It's the spectacle.
Rubbernecking.
Yeah, it's the idea of the spectacle. Doesn't matter what's
And
happened. It's the idea of the spectacle.
I remember, I think it was in the 90s, the police were out saying to folks with car crashes on the motorway, if you see one in the opposite lane, don't slow down to have a look at it, because the number of car crashes or accidents and pile-ups that was happening in the opposite lanes to the initial crash, because drivers were slowing down to, as they call it, rubberneck and have a look at what's going on, and not realising that they're slowing down to, in the UK, 30 mile an hour from 70. The guy behind you still travelling at 70. Bang, rear-ended, another accident. There's obviously thousands upon thousands of pounds worth of damage done, but there's
Yep.
also the potential of lives lost, certainly impacted upon through loss of limb and what have you, and trauma, but potentially lives lost as well. It's just don't do it, folks. It's bad and it's tempting, but come on, be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Audrey Revenue knows Fluffy too. Yes, I know his real name is Gabriel Iglesias, but his nickname is Fluffy. He's
I'd go
Fluffy.
with I would go with Fluffy if my real name is Gabriel Iglesias, to be fair. But
Anyone that
yeah,
hasn't checked out Fluffy, Fluffy is awesome.
it's an interesting analogy he came up with. The only difference being that in India they don't really seem to follow any. They drive in every lane at every opportunity anyway,
Yeah.
and not necessarily on the one side of the street.
No, but it's the idea of the spectacle that in the
Yeah,
Western world we are trained, we are conditioned to look for the spectacle, and so now, especially with YouTube, what tends to happen, and I'm not trying to attack any other creators, or talk ill of them, but what's happening is because creators have realized that the spectacle will bring in a bigger audience, which will bring in more super chats, which will bring in more revenue. The tendency is to go towards what works and what will get them the quick buck. And again, that's not an attack on any particular individual. It's just something that I've noticed. They won't deviate, or they're afraid, they're too afraid of the numbers. The numbers game is always the most important. Um, Especially when this becomes a full-time gig for someone. They always, no, I'm not attacking FTFE. Don't even. I'm not attacking anyone. Get the fuck. Um, I'm saying in general, the it would seem, it would seem, see, I'm being clever. It would seem that there's this fear to deviate from what they know works. He also said there were 5 different stages. Wait, and Fluffy is one of them. Yes, yes. But he calls himself Fluffy. That's why I call him Fluffy. Says, okay, I'll attack FTFE instead. Go ahead, I suppose. Yeah. So
just not with a dragon.
He can't because he doesn't have one, nor will he. No dragon for Dusk. But yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to discuss was why people have a fixation on the idea of the First Amendment, the idea of freedom of speech. The right wing will always use it as a battering ram against anyone else, because if they're allowed to speak, and because we don't know how to talk back to them, or combat what they're saying, because a lot of the time they use populist arguments to disguise the vileness of their racism. If we don't know how to combat them in everyday life, then they've won because they're able to recruit. At the same time, if we don't allow them to have a say and to be part of the public the discourse, what tends to happen then is they act like the bastions of free speech, and you turn them into victims. And it's easier to play the victim role and get people around you saying, I just want to have this conversation. Or one of the biggest things, I'm just asking questions. Oh, I'm just asking questions. That's a trigger fucking sentence for me. I hate when well, I'm just asking questions. No, what you're doing is you're making assertions. You're making assertions that are dangerous, and they're dangerous, but you want to make other people ask those questions and make those assertions and create those links in people's minds, because we as humans are designed to notice patterns. Oh, you can't get a job. Oh, look at the level of migrants coming in. Oh, look at the refugees. Not saying I'm just asking questions. And so, in the minds of ordinary people, again, because they want an easy fix, or they want a better explanation than one they've gotten. Well, if I can't get a job and people are coming into the country, it must be their fault. So that's the danger. You see, that's the danger. And the big thing is, what I would advise everyone to be able to do is to be able to combat that, is to learn how to actually debate, learn how to argue for what you believe. Because only that will take the power away from people that will deny freedom of speech and human rights to others, to groups in society. By refusing to allow them to speak, instead of just ridiculing what they're saying, what happens is they're given a platform in itself to say, they won't let us speak, they won't let us speak. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, I know people there's a few people in the chat that are absolutely against platforming, particularly of the likes of fascists. But there is no winning in that situation. And again, my feeling on it is, I would rather have the conversation out in the open and show why these
Yeah.
ideas are not the best ones to follow, rather than allow them to go in secret. I want to know who is the fascist. I want to know who the racist is. I want to know who thinks that I'm not worthy because I'm a woman. I want to know who it is I'm actually going to dinner with in my neighborhood that believes that I'm a lesser human being because I'm LGBT. I want to know who they are. I want to be able to point them out in the street and say, this person believes this. And you can't do that if they're hidden away. More and more, uh, they're getting more, what's the word, confident? Not confident, but they're getting more daring. They're
Brazen.
getting more daring.
More brazen. Yeah, that's what I was going to say when you're talking about the whole deplatforming thing. You much rather want to keep them in the light where you can keep an eye on what they're saying. As soon as you deplatform them, they go underground and you don't know what the hell they're doing and what they're up to.
Cockroaches have this thing of breeding in the dark. Don't let them breed. Or at least not
Even though they do
without.
have a good thing. They do have a good theme tune though.
But at least not without having a proper conversation. Doing the gob, hey, Tusk, fuck off. Telling me to shut my mouth. That's censorship. That's censorship. Freedom of speech, biatch. But what's funny is the amount of Europeans that try to use the First Amendment. And you're sitting there like, you're not in the US now, sunshine. Doesn't work over here. There is barriers. Like, for instance, you cannot go in to a theater and scream fire. You can't do it. You would be arrested for putting people at risk.
I was going to say, well,
Very
it's not that you can't do it. You can do it, but if you do, what will happen is you will spend time in the pokey.
Yes, you will, and rightly so. I've worked in a cinema. I mean, if people people. Ah, yes, Tusk pogue my hone. Pogue my fucking hone. Bob Nodell's gyroscope knows a little bit of Oscailga. For anyone that doesn't, it's okay. It's okay.
Well.
But yeah, I think that is all I had on my mind. So if anyone has any questions that they would like answered, please do tag me in the chat. Taddy, do you have anything else you would like to bring up, or do you have any questions?
Do I have any? Oh, I've got lots of questions, but free speech wise. See, I was always under the impression as once again, obviously, I live in the UK. Don't know if you could guess that or no. But I was always under the impression that in the UK we don't have any right, right to free speech or freedom of speech. We only have the privilege of speech that is granted to us in public places.
That's a great way of putting it, actually. That is a great way of putting it.
I do remember once there was it was in made the news, and it was during a royal visit to Windsor, I believe it was, and it was, I don't know if it was the Queen or the Queen Mum that was doing the tour, but there was a protester in the crowd who was trying to highlight the whole freedom of speech thing, and all he did was hold up an A4 piece of paper, white piece of paper, with the word boom, BOOM, written on it. And under the British law, that is considered an attempt on the life of a royal through the whole freedom of speech. Yeah, because you don't. But the reason he did it in a bit of paper is because you don't even have to shout it. You don't even have to speak it for it to be done, or for it to be classed as freedom, or done under freedom of speech, or restricted speech, or whatever it is, whatever way they term it.
Audrey says, I heard that libel and slander laws are really strict in the UK. Is it true? You live in the UK. Is it true?
I would say ask a lawyer. To be quite honest with you in that one, I have absolutely nothing to compare it against, and no pertinent working knowledge of the
I think the big difference. I think the big difference is in American courts, the burden of proof rests with the person who brings a claim, whereas in the British court, the burden of proof rests with the person who the claim is about. So you have to prove that you haven't libeled someone, whereas in the US, they have to prove that they did libel you.
They have libeled you.
Yeah.
Aye, that's the burden of proof slightly different then. Now, yeah.
And that's a huge difference. We get a lot of Americans coming to the UK to sue from slander because the laws, well, yeah. So yay! Thank you, Tusk. So I did get that right. Yeah, it's the burden of proof, and if you can prove that you have not libeled someone and not slandered anyone, then you're off. Whereas the other, you have to prove that they did libel you. You have the burden of proof if you bring in America, if you bring the case. So, for instance, the slap laws, they are a preliminary hearing to say, well, what burden of proof do you have? What proof do you have that this person has slandered you? What burden of proof do you have that this person has libeled you? And at that case, if you don't have any proof, then the courts will throw it out. That's why it's considered liberal. Whereas in the UK, you have to prove that you didn't do what you're accused of, We have a law that states that you have no right to your dignity, so we had spit an image, but they were careful not to slander. Interesting. Clive says, my understanding is that in British law, everything is allowed unless prohibited, whereas in other jurisdictions, rights are given by the state to the citizen, so it's in a sense reversed. Yes. Yes. That one. You only, as far as I know, you only have free speech at Speaker's Corner. Where is Speaker's Corner?
Speaker's Corner, that's Hyde Park.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, that could be. That rings a vague bell somewhere, but whether or not it's one of those urban myths or not, I'm not too sure. So as the phrase was couched in the chat, yeah, I think.
Yeah, the other thing is when it comes to the US, as we've seen recently with John Oliver, if you can prove that, like, this is the thing that Tusk is on about, you can't imply that it's realistic. So you can make any outrageous claim at all, and it'll fall under freedom of speech.
So we can get Mr. Nutter Butter on.
Yeah. Eat it, Bob.
Hey, Bob. Eat it.
Bear in mind, the UK has an unwritten constitution, and it's a constitutional monarchy, so it's a little. It works a little bit different than the US.
This is true. This is true.
So that's an important one because, yeah,
that is a very important distinction.
Yeah, the satire has to be clear, so ridiculous that no reasonable person would actually take it seriously and believe it. Yeah, pretty much. That was a great question, actually. Anyone else have any more questions before I fuck off out of here and possibly get drunk? Because sure, why not? Oh, by the way, someone asked, I think it was Dora that asked what was where's the goat? Where's the goat for tomorrow? You're gonna have to show up tomorrow and find it. I'm not telling. It's more than my life's worth. Because
do you actually know as of? Do you know as of yet, or has
Reason will
disclosed that to you?
Ass. Reason will kick my ass if I say.
So he has disclosed it to you, so you do know in advance, right? Okay.
Do I?
Okay.
I don't know.
Well,
do I?
Well, you've just stuck yourself in there. You just stuck yourself in there. Ha ha ha. So the thing is, it tomorrow? Is it on your channel or on Reasons tomorrow?
Tomorrow is on my channel.
It's on your channel, and is the event up? No.
The event is up.
Yet, no.
The event is up. Yeah.
I can't see it.
Yeah, it's up. It's up. So if people want to put the thingy on, stop cursing. No, I will not. I won't fucking stop fucking cursing.
Fucking cursing. Stop fucking cursing. Get it
yeah.
fucking right, for Christ's sake.
I will not fucking stop fucking cursing. Never. Absolutely not.
Cool.
Score, it's okay. Score told us where it was before on his live stream. In which case, you don't need me to tell you. We just have to get enough alcohol and tequila to see. Oh! Hang on. I will get better at this. I do have a PayPal, and thank you very much for any PayPal donations. But it's yeah, I need to get better with use of my PayPal. Was there a PayPal? Someone said check my PayPal, and that's the wrong PayPal. Give me a minute.
Don't check that one. Hey. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. This has to be done now.
What are you doing? I dread it when you get ideas.
Oh no, just a nice one. Nothing too bad.
What is it? Did I
Just a
miss it?
hashtag. Yeah, just a hashtag Kilo can't take inside chat.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
Nice.
okay. That was a suggestion. No, don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured. Jesus. Um, did you actually send a PayPal? Because I forget that I have it sometimes. I'm sorry. I'm really bad. Like I'm really bad at asking people to fucking donate to the channel because I've been under extreme pressure at work. So I was like, will I actually turn off the memberships because I feel bad that I haven't really done it. But no, there's absolutely no fucking pressure. Seriously, Dora, no pressure. Absolutely no pressure. I appreciate you just being here because Tatty will tell you I was actually nervous going live that nobody would turn up because I don't usually go live on a Saturday night,
Yep.
and it is a fucking
Yep.
Saturday night and people have lives and stuff, which I
She
don't.
she was bricking herself, and it was quite funny to listen to be quite honest with you.
Thanks, thanks. My
I enjoyed it. I tried my best not to try and soothe you in any
confidence,
way.
confidence going through the fucking roof right now. Tuss says we don't have an unwritten constitution; it's merely codified. The British Constitution, if codified, would be roughly 10,000 pages long. We have laws going back a millennium. This is true. This is true. And some of your laws we have still in our on our law books, which is
Well, that must
absolutely
that must be
shocking.
nice for you. That must be lovely for you.
Yeah, fucking delightful. So yes, if there's no other questions, thank you guys for coming out. I usually keep these an hour and a half. Thank you, Audrey. It was nice to see you. I will see you in Creakies tomorrow, I'm sure, where we will basically drive him crazy as we always do. It's good fun. Um, thank you, guys. I will see you soon. And again, tomorrow we will have Ion Society. No, we've just done Ion Society. See, this is me. This is me. My brain is fucked. Tomorrow we have Life on the Flip Side. And on Agree to Disagree, there is a debate on something or other.
Oh, what was it
Isotopic.
again?
What isotopic? I can't remember. It's something anyway. So if you're part of Agree to Disagree, look out. I think it's at 2 o'clock. Again, the event is up for
Isochrone.
so
There you go. Isochrone dating
isochronic
and young
dating.
Earth creationists.
That one. That one. I'm a great host. Dora says not pressured at all. Whatever it is used for, enjoy whatever it's used for. Thank you so much, Dora. I do. I can't even begin to explain how much I appreciate anyone even showing up, let alone actually donating to the channel. It's a huge deal for me. So thank you. Um, dish your dumplings. I don't have dumplings. Interesting. Interesting concept.
Robert Dumpling's gyroscope. Oh no,
Oh
it's
yeah.
instead of Bob.
Yes,
No.
socks.
Oh,
Right. I am out of
Hope
here.
he's, hope he's got one of
Thank
those
y'all
super
for
duper
coming out.
low.
Yeah, it's been an hour and a half nearly. So I'm happy. I'm happy. I can go to sleep. Kent Hovind is never prepared for that. Space coming. Yeah. By the way, I am considering just as a thing. I am considering doing a little thing, um, where I have pictures of goats still on my phone that I might just put into a little video because sure, why not? Fuck it. Maybe some videos. I'm a year off the farm now, so but I do still have photos and videos and shit that you might want to see. So might do that. Let me know in the description in the comment section if you want me to do that. If you want more goats, and I am in the process of writing my book on my experiences with the goats. So that's happening. That is happening. It should be out in the next like 20 years, whenever I get around to doing it. So goodbye, folks. Let me see the goats.
We have no goats. We don't have no goats. We don't have no ghosts. All we got is fade to black. Goodbye.